Okay, we're finally live. I don't know what today brought. Skynet had it in for us, but we fought back and we won and we have triumphed. And now we are here. Welcome to another episode of Keystroke Medium. It is season 4, episode 4. And we are here with Matthew Mather today. I am Josh Hayes with my co-host Scott Moon. And my goodness, what a crazy run of shenanigans we had there for about 10 minutes trying to get everybody to work. Scott broke his computer and his phone, and then we broke 2 of Matt's computers and also his phone all at the same time. I'm not really exactly sure how that all happened, but I'm glad it worked out. So Matthew, welcome to the show, brother.
Welcome to technological disaster. That's what we do.
Last time I saw you two guys, we were in Las Vegas together.
Yeah, we were in Las Vegas.
I do remember that vaguely.
A couple of drinks in, I remember.
That's right. Oh, walking down the strip was a great time.
There may or may not be fire.
We need to do a hangover movie the second round in November this year too.
Yeah,
I don't think we're allowed to talk about anything that happened.
Yeah. Well, isn't that a rule in Vegas? What happens there stays there.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Especially
I'd like to enforce that rule too.
Yes, sir.
Especially when there's fire involved.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That wasn't me. That was
That's some other guy. Well, I'm glad you were able to come hang out with us today, Matt, and super excited for your new release. Polar Vortex is doing extremely well on Amazon, so congratulations for that.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, it's minus. I just walked back from dinner. It's minus, I think, 32 outside right now in Montreal.
Oh,
so that polar vortex is working its way in right here.
That's all because you wrote the book. And
great timing.
I did release it in the middle of January, and the north of North America is going to be pretty cold about this. So.
I was going to say, was that very purposeful to release that in wintertime?
Yeah, I knew that there was going to be the polar vortex thing. Every year in the U.S. they get obsessed, the news channels or at least the weather channels about the polar vortex. So I figured there was a pretty good chance. And right on time, like just a couple of days before I released the book, there are all these headlines about the polar vortex fracturing. Then all my fans said, "How did you know?" And I said, "Well, it's winter. That's what happens."
I use science.
I'm psychic. I'm a writer. Hello, I know everything.
Nostradamus, No.
It has been foretold in the prophecies of old.
Yeah.
Well, it's still a #1 bestseller on Amazon, and it's what a week and a half, 2 weeks out now.
It's actually a week just right now. Yeah, so it's doing pretty well. It came down. It was up there in the top 100 and for a couple of days, and it's sort of come back down. But I'm hoping it'll get back up there. It's kind of it's an unusual book for me actually. It's not sort of my main thrust that I've done with a lot of my other novels, but it was a story I'd had for years going around in my head, so I just decided to put it out. Yeah.
Cool.
So you've written, I'm sure everybody's heard of Cyberstorm. Darknet came out, last year, 2 years ago or something. The Utopia Chronicles is probably one of your best known works.
Thank you. Yeah.
For some of our listeners and viewers that might not know who you are, just kind of give us a little background on Matthew and how you got started in writing.
Well, I had a whole previous life before I became a writer. I was a regular, I was in the technology development space. So I spent about 20 years starting up technology companies, and I did everything from haptic feedback devices and virtual reality and electronic payment systems and all sorts of stuff. And I just kind of got to about halfway through my life to about when I got to my 40th year, I decided to take a year off work, took a sabbatical year, and that's when I wrote Utopia Chronicles. So I just took a whole year off work. This is like 9-10 years ago. And then it just sat on the shelf actually for 2 or 3 years. But then I'd met Hugh Howey, who's pretty famous in these parts. And I met him in New York, and this is before Hugh had released Wool. And then we were talking, and he's saying, "Oh, I should go into self-publishing." And so he put Wool out, and it became a massive success. And then I put Utopia out in a few different chunks. And this was after, it's the classic story of 100 different publishers had rejected it and said it would never sell. And that book sold 150,000 copies now. So yeah, it's to publish.
Yeah, right. Actually, I remember Atopia being one of my very first e-reader purchases, like, I don't know, back 2011 or 2010 or whenever it was. I picked up, obviously everybody had Wool, but then I had several other books that, and I didn't even realize that self-publishing was what I was reading, right? Like I was just finding books on my e-reader, and that was one of the first ones I picked up.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that I inducted you into the world. And
Yeah,
That's right.
it could have gone horribly the other way.
That's right.
E-readers
What
are
is-
dumb. I'm gonna
What
get
is this?
Yeah. Well, it was, and it was actually that book, and I originally called it Future Dawn, spelled with a PH. And it was actually Hugh Howey who looked at the stories, and we were sitting in a cafe in New York, and he said, "You can't call it that. It's just too complicated." So I said, so I sat back on the airplane back. I decided to call it Atopia, and so that's a true story.
titles.
And you
can
kind
be good.
of your journey through indie publishing, as it were, is kind of very different from most indie authors' journeys, well, except for maybe a couple where you don't technically write in series, and you don't follow the normal paradigm of spending the last couple of years of doing rapid releases and doing like long running series. I mean, you've only got 10 or 11 books out.
Yeah.
But
10 books as of right now. Yeah.
but I mean, your success is phenomenal, which goes against what the indie model suggests is you need to have, 20, 30 books out, and you have these long running series, but you've got this massive fan base.
Yeah. How do I explain that?
Yeah.
I mean, anytime that there's an accepted method of doing something, it probably it works in the favor of the few that go against the grain, against the accepted wisdom. And I think you have to write what you love, and I've always loved like the well executed single novel. Even though it's, once you get a good series going, it's much easier to make a living off that. But I've always had I love like a good Tom Clancy novel, or even, well, I mean, Tom Clancy novels were kind of series, I guess, but like a good Michael Crichton novel or something. And I just love that single novel with a single idea that you kind of pull off. So I've got those ideas running around in my head. So when I've got one of those, like Polar Vortex is a single title, but it's just a fun story and something I wanted to get out. And I think there's a certain group of readers also that really, like, they look at something and they see it as a series. And then not everybody, a lot of people like the series, but some people say, I don't want to buy a book where I've got to read 10 other books to get to the conclusion of it. I just want one book where I've got, like, this is a book and it's well plotted out and it comes to a conclusion and that's it. And it's, like a fun single read. And so I don't think there's a lot of people doing that in the indie world. And so I probably benefit from that. Like that, if people aren't doing it, then people will look for people that have got books like that. So I think I from that. Yeah.
What you mentioned right at the beginning that Polar Vortex was kind of something that you don't normally write, or that it's different from what you've written in the past. What did you mean by that?
Well, it's because it doesn't really have a science fiction element to it, and I don't really want to put my foot on a bomb or anything, but it does have some of those elements in it. I've got, like, there's a lot of apocalyptic stuff in there, and there's a mystery going on as to what actually happens to this airliner that goes missing and what happens to the passengers. It's sort of a mystery of where they go, and I'm not going to tell anybody what happens, but it's a little bit of a departure for me anyway. But it was a story that I had, kind of living in the North, in Canada right now. I see a lot of changes that are going on up here, and without stepping onto the whole landmine of, climate change or whatever, I can tell you that there changes are happening in the far North. And it's interesting to talk about the changing geopolitical situation, and to put, it's basically like an international mystery thriller set in the far North with all these geopolitical stuff that's going on up here. So yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it. And it's just when you get that little bug in your head of like a story that you want to tell, and like, this is just a great story, like airliners only just started going over the North Pole about 15 years ago at the end of Perestroika, and then the Russians started to allow people to do overflights. And then with the airliners becoming more reliable, you start to see these routes now going from like Beijing to New York, going from India over to Chicago, going straight over the North Pole. And so I had one of my fans is a guy called Monte Dunard, who's a pilot for American. And I started to talk to him, and he was actually doing these routes going straight over the North Pole. And he actually took pictures for me, like out of the cockpit of his 777 going over the North Pole. And I'm like, so I started talking to him, and I said, well, say if you had to crash that thing on the North Pole, what would you do? And he goes, oh yeah, I do this, and I dump the fuel, and I go gear up, and so he gave me all of this stuff about what you'd have to do, and then also a lot of technical stuff on the aircraft itself, and so that just added a lot of realism into the scenario that I put down in the book. And then I had a few other people that I always do like primary research with my books. So I had people that done a lot of exploring in the far north, and I've been up in the Arctic myself as well. So it was a story that I had to get out. And
so now I'm interested then, if you said that the planes have only been flying over the North Pole for the last 15 years or so, why didn't they up until then?
Russians.
Well, yeah, no, part of it's the Russian, because to fly over the North Pole, like Russia, once you get up to the top of the world, Russia takes over half of the circumference of the planet, like it goes all the way around. So if you want to fly those routes from Asia or Europe over to North America, and you want to go over the North Pole, you inevitably have to cross over Russia for most of those routes anyway.
Okay.
So when the Cold War was going on,
right,
they weren't so keen on having people flying giant jets over top of.
That's strange.
Yeah, so that was the whole. But that being said, even though they allow the flights now, there's still all of those installations are still up there to do the early warning systems.
Mm-hmm.
The dew line, they called it, is still up there for monitoring. If there's any airplanes that are coming that aren't supposed to be coming, or ballistic missiles or whatever. And now with, there's been every week you'll see, if you go and look for it in the news, you'll see reports of, the Russians encroaching on U.S. airspace, and the U.S. encroaching on this. They even had a story about China sending up icebreakers, and they're trying to buy parts of Greenland to use as a base for China to do operations in the Arctic. So it's all like all the big players are moving up to the Arctic as the ice melts, because there's all the resources, and then there's shipping routes, and so there's a lot of geopolitical play that's happening. So it made a very fertile ground to do a geopolitical thriller, on the Arctic ice pack. And I don't think, to my knowledge, nobody's done a TV show or a movie about an airliner crashing on the North Pole. So I got that one in first.
It's fascinating because, I always knew that we didn't fly over the North Pole, but I never really thought about why. You just assumed that you went over the Atlantic or the Pacific or whatever, but it makes perfect sense. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's shorter, so it's less fuel.
Yeah.
And as the airplanes become more reliable, like to fly over the frozen, like when you're at 40,000 feet, it's -70 anyway. It doesn't make any difference whether you're over the North Pole or whether you're flying over the Pacific.
Right.
Right. So for the airplane, it doesn't make any difference at all. So it's just, and so there's a lot more routes that are being created right now going over the North Pole. And for the pilots, they don't care. They're just like, it's the same.
Yeah. Whatever, we're flying.
They just hit autopilot and then do some while they're flying or taking pictures for famous authors.
It's very nice of them. I could show you.
Right. One of the interesting things about going back to being kind of the outside of the regular writing scheme is that you mentioned that this book doesn't have any sci-fi elements, which most of your books do.
It does a little. It has some sci-fi elements, but it's little. It's less. I don't want to give away too much of the story.
Sure.
Yeah, but anyway, go on.
I was gonna say, do you ever get any feedback from readers that are like, oh, you wrote the Utopia Chronicles, and then you wrote this, that it's a real world thing and there's no aliens or anything? Did you get any feedback like that, or do they know that it's going to be a Matthew Mather novel, so they just go with it?
Yeah, I mean, there's to start off with, I've never written any novels with aliens, although I do have an alien contact novel in mind, but I've never used like zombies or anything. Like, I write, everything that I write is based in the real world. Sometimes it's 50 years in the future.
Right.
But yeah, it's, you know, for me anyway, I have to write whatever whatever motivates me or gets me excited and gets me up. So if I've got a story in my head that I want to write about, then I need to write about that. And my readers, for the most part, they come with me. So I've got some readers say, I really love Daytopia and the sort of the far out technology, futuristic kind of thing, but they still come along the ride with Polar Vortex, and they really enjoy it. It's like, they're going to assume that it's going to be a fun, mystery, a little bit of science. There's always going to be sort of that science element in it. Even in Polar Vortex, it's quite heavy on sort of the science side of it and the technical aspect, and less heavy on the future science fiction. My next set of books, actually, I have another release coming out this summer, which is going to be the first in sort of a future detective series. But that's only going to be based a couple of years in the future.
That could be cool. I'm interested in that. Yeah. It sounds like you got kind of the thriller mystery. There's always a question. When you started talking about Polar Vortex, you're like, well, this plane is missing. Where did it go? So there's something question needs to be answered. I'm sure readers like that. That's why I got so mad when I watched 6 seasons of Lost and they never really answered any questions. And I was I had to stand in the corner and fight myself.
I always like to watch like the first 4 seasons and then imagine because you get past that and it's worthless.
Yeah, we did have a question in the live chat. Rick asks, how do you market a standalone novel? Advice.
Yeah, well, you market the same way as you market any other book. It's just the problem with it is that in the world that we're entering now, you put a lot of money into advertising budgets, like continuous advertising, which you can plow more money into the first book and take a loss on it if you're going to make money off the other books. But what I found actually is if you have a series of standalone books, an advantage that you do have is that if somebody reads one of my standalone books, they'll go and read the other standalone books. And so it's almost like a series because they'll go and buy the other books. But then you can advertise every single one of those books by itself. Whereas in a series, you can only really advertise the first one. So there's sort of if you can create a series of standalone books that are thematically linked, that if people read one, they'll go and read all the other ones. It's like having a series, but you can advertise every single book separately because they're all separate concept. So
it doesn't matter where you start. You can start wherever. You
can start wherever because they're all single title things. As long as the person reading them has faith that each book is going to be the same sort of quality and interesting taking on an idea, I guess that's what I've been doing, really. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned Michael Crichton, and he really, I don't know if he pioneered that type, but you have a book about dinosaurs, and then you have a book about sign language talking monkeys, and then you have a book about an alien intelligence that is never really explained in the book at all. So with Sphere, which is one of my favorite books. So I guess you find the fans that are intrigued by that kind of thing, and you bring them along on a smart, intelligent journey. They're going to go with you for sure.
Yeah, those are the books that I really enjoyed. I loved all but the books that I always really loved before I became a writer were mostly the single, the single topic books about something that you'd go, wow, like that's really, eye-opening and interesting. And then it's got an interesting plot to it. And there's a lot of, like Danny Aronson, as a writer I work with a lot, but he always loved, the big series fantasy stuff, and that's what he writes. So I think you just have to write stuff that you really loved, and then you kind of reproduce that as a writer. And I guess that's, if I don't get up in the morning and I'm not excited about what I'm writing about, then I'll just sit and watch Netflix. So
never wrong.
That's never wrong.
Maybe Amazon Prime,
Yeah.
Right.
I've been watching American Gods this week, so.
Yeah. I need to start watching that. It's on season 2 now, and I meant to start watching it when season 1 came out, but I don't know why. I don't know why I didn't start watching it, but I need to. It looks really good.
So
it reminds me a little of that. Was it Piers Anthony, the on a pale horse? Am I remembering?
Yeah, it's on a pale horse. There's a whole series about the Grim Reaper.
Yeah, I enjoyed those. Yeah,
those are good stuff. Blake Peel asks, how long do you typically spend plotting or writing a book?
Then
Rick Partlow says that he watches Russian car crash videos. I'm not sure how that pertains to anything, but thought I'd throw that in there.
Let's
sort of
let's
like
do this.
Crash.
But before we get into process, let's do the show sponsor real quick, and then we can go through the whole last half hour for
plotting.
process.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Dig it.
This episode of Keystroke Medium is brought to you by Captain Phenom by KR McClellan, The Amazing World of Captain Phenom, Book 1. This is not your average superhero. Charlie Platt is a 15-year-old boy with cerebral palsy, a loner that likes to draw superheroes. Just about everyone at his school picks on him, calls him Charlie Splat. His only true friend is his next door neighbor, Maggie McGee, a tomboy a year younger than Charlie. One day, while at a routine doctor's appointment, he accidentally is given a serum intended for adult test subjects to cure cerebral palsy. But this particular serum had been mistakenly radiated from being near uranium, meant for an atomic bomb being brought into the city by terrorists. When the mutated serum is in his blood, Charlie starts to feel stronger. But when he gets put under stress, he mutates into Captain Phenom, a strong, super fast hero for the people. He sets out to get even with the bullies that have made his life hell. But when he learns of the terrorist threat to the city, he has a new objective. That is Captain Phenom by KR McClellan. The link is going to be in the live chat in 2 seconds once it comes up here. Go and check it out. Buy it.
1002, 1000.
Boom. Got it. It's in the live chat now, and of course, it'll be in the show notes on the podcast and the video as we go forward. So go and pick it up, Captain Phenom by KR McClellan. He's a fan of the show, and I think he's watching right now. So congratulations, Rick, on your book, or KR rather. Congratulations, and so moving forward into process.
The original question was, how long do you typically spend plotting or writing a book?
Yes.
So I try to keep the writing, and this is different than most indie writers that I know right now. It takes me about 2 to 3 months to write a book, but I'm writing a book. My typical book length is like 90 to 100,000 words. That's my about 90. Aim for 90,000, and it'll take me about 2.5 months to plot it, and then maybe 2.5 months to write it, and then probably 2 months to edit and get it back out. So I've averaged in the last 7 or 8 years about 8 months per book, which is pretty slow compared to people putting them out every month. I'm trying to speed it up to about once every 6 months, but when you're doing a lot of single topic books, you've got to come up with a whole new cast of characters. You got to come up with a theme. You got to come up with the underlying all the different plot arcs. It's challenging to get the sort of the texture and the theme of the book right. So yeah.
No, 8 months.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I was going to say 8 months, though, even on a traditional schedule, 8 months is super fast.
Yeah, and I do have, I've actually got a traditional contract right now for a 3-book series, but I've convinced them to push it up to 1 book every 9 months, even though usually they go one book a year is about usually their fastest pace, but we pushed it up to 1 book every 9 months. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Very cool. Daniela Neo is in the live chat. She says she is your #1 fan. That's what she said.
Hey Daniela, she's in Buenos Aires. Yeah, she is my #1 fan in Argentina and probably in the world, I would think.
She used like 6 exclamation points. I mean, like 3 in the
Thanks, Daniela.
So yeah, going through on your plotting and your planning your book for 2.5 months, is that research? Is that plotting? Like, what goes into that 2.5 months before you actually start writing?
Yeah, I mean it's research, it's plotting, and then it's research. You know, there's I won't lie, there's a lot of breaks taking watching Netflix and Prime Video in there, but I do try to mix in a lot of primary research. So like talking to the airline pilots, talking to explorers, people who go into the far north in the last book. You know, for one of my books, Darknet, I have a final scene that takes place on a Mohawk reservation. So I actually went and I called called up the Mohawk elders, and they actually let me come and meet with them. And I went to like a powwow with the Mohawks, and they actually took me that they have a data center on their site, and they showed me around, and I got to talk with them. A lot of them were actually U.S. Rangers, and so I got a lot of like primary stories right in the mouth, and asked them if I could use some of those stories. And then I put that in the book Darknet. So that's some of those books have like some real. They're not just stuff that I've made up. There's real like personal stories of people that are, you know, actually sort of, obviously I'm not taking exactly their stories, but I'm sort of, you know, ad-libbing a little bit off some of the things that they shared with me. So, and that's something I always try to do in my books, is to mix the real world with the world that I'm imagining, so that you can't tell the difference between the two. And so you need to have a lot of real world stuff mixed in with the made up world stuff. And if you do that well enough, then you get that suspension of disbelief, and people, you know, can go into the world.
It seems like the authenticity from those types of interviews and those experiences really has to show through, and it makes a lot more sense that you would take 8 months, because you can't publish a book every month if you're going out and meeting people firsthand and traveling around and doing that stuff.
Yeah, and I do try to like in the next book that I'm writing right now, a lot of it's taking place in Kiev, and then it's taking place also in at the Interpol headquarters in France. So I'm actually going to take a trip, and well, I'm planning on wanting to go out to Kiev. I have another fan of mine out there as well. But it's and at the beginning of Darknet, it happens in London. So I actually went to London. I had walked around the financial district and wrote a lot of the scenes while I was actually there. So it helps to have that. I like traveling, so by traveling and then combining that with actually writing some passages of the books when you're actually in some of those places, it adds a whole other level of immersion, I think, for the reader as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I don't like about writing science fiction on planets that don't exist. Like, I can't go and actually stand there and look, because I would imagine, and I'm sure writers have done this for years and years, you go and you stand in London where you're writing a scene about it, and you get a whole kind of a feeling for that. So that, like, the smells, and then, I mean, even the way the air feels, and different things that you wouldn't get just by looking at Google Images, you know?
You get run over because you looked right instead of left when you cross the street. It's hard to replace that.
Right.
You know, you can put that experience, even if you get run over, you can put that into a book.
I mean, that's definitely going in the book.
You put everything in the book.
I'd read someplace that Americans in England have that problem, because when we cross the street, we all, you know, we look to the left, and that's the wrong.
That's why when you look down at every crosswalk, it says look left or look right. I can't remember what it tells you.
Yeah.
Where to look.
I always turn 360 degrees, and I lay down. I climb up on top of something, and I look around, and then I'd go after that.
If your mother should have said you always look left and right whenever you're going to cross the street. That's
yeah. I
wonder if you get hit by a car and you have to go to the hospital in London. I wonder if that hospital trip is then tax deductible because you are doing research and you put that injury in the book. I bet it would be.
Maybe.
Well, yeah. If they charge you. I was in Rome with my mom 2 years ago, and she fell over, and she unfortunately broke her ankle. So took her off to the Italian hospital in the middle of Rome. They went, went, set her leg, did the whole thing, whatever. And at the end of it, she got her credit card out. She lives in North Carolina, so it's Americans who are used to having to pay. And they said, "Oh, no, it's a social healthcare system. It's okay. Go home. Go. Nothing."
Nice.
So if I would bet you that if you broke your leg while you're in England and you went to the NHS, they would probably fix you up, and you'd say you're American. They'd say, just go home. It's fine.
Yeah, I can take a lot more chances when I'm traveling abroad than I thought. It's okay.
Let's not get the discussion of healthcare. That's just, I'm just saying it actually happened. We went to town and we spent like a whole day at the hospital with all kinds of doctors. And at the end of it, they just said, it's fine. Just go back.
Wow. It's pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we talked about kind of your research a little bit and what goes into that. So when you get to the writing phase of it, what does that look like for you when you're in that mode of actually putting, well, fingers to keys?
Yeah, I mean, I just try to I try to put out, the 2,000 to 3,000 words a day kind of thing. It's not very remarkable. It's I try to get up early. If I'm in writing mode, I try to get up early in the morning, and usually by lunchtime I'm finished with the writing stuff, and then just go on and do, when you have your own business like writing, you get to work half days, and you can choose if it's the first 12 hours, the second 12 hours.
I like a half day.
Right.
So then once I finish the writing, then you'd go and start do all the marketing and the advertising and the blah blah blah, which is never ending. Yeah.
That's good stuff.
So do you only work on the one project at a time? I mean, you mentioned you've got something coming on with a series with a traditional publisher. You've got the detective series. All these are in different stages, obviously, of production.
No, I only do one book at a time. My brain does not. Well, it's possible for me to. I can be starting writing another book or plotting a book while I'm doing the editing of a previous book. Usually I send it off to, like, I've got a multi-stage editing process. Like, I'll start off with the content editing with a content editor, and then send it off to early beta readers, and then, do maybe 2 revisions to the story structurally, and then get into line editing and stylistic editing, send it off to beta readers again, and then come back and then send it off for typo editing, and then final. It's like 3 or 4 stages of editing, which takes quite a while to go through. So, but that usually is only a couple hours a day. So I can usually get into plotting or starting to write another book while I'm doing the editing of the previous one. But I still have a hard time making the mind switch, going from one set of characters to the other. Yeah.
Probably if you just watch a little Netflix, you could like make a break.
Netflix does fix everything.
That's what I would do. Sorry.
Or kill everything. I don't know.
Yeah. or binge watch 6 days later.
What? Yeah. What happened? Yeah.
Kayleen Williams would like to know if you start with characters or do you start with the story plot first when you're developing?
I'm a plot driven writer. Yeah. I try not to. Well, that being said, there's always the argument between the pantsers and the plotsters. Do you let the characters just go willy-nilly through a world and see what happens? But I'm very much in the camp of, especially because I try to write thrillers, and thrillers have to be very tightly plotted, and they have to be highly structured. That being said, though, once you create your characters in that world and you know where you need them to get to, you can still let them run around and do, slightly, as long as everybody gets to the exit door at the same time, it's fine, but you can let them run around the gymnasium doing crazy stuff a little bit, but you got to sort of corral them all to that finishing endpoint you're trying to get to.
It's like watching The Amazing Race or something.
They've all something you got, where you got to get them to, so you just got to sort of let them go. I'm sure people have heard it before, but I sort of put up the big tent poles, like the end of Act 1, sort of the midpoint, the hard right turn, and there's a lot of different, there's a standard 3-act structure. There's the the hero's journey. If you get into mystery and murder mystery, you've got the 2-body plot, the 3-body plot, the 5-act structure, the 4-act structure. So you sort of have to look at some of those and see what fits your book the best way, and sort of adapt to some of those different models, or put some of those models together. Ultimately, when I put a plot together, I start out structuring it, and then I let the plot sort of take over at a certain point and drive the book by itself.
One of the things I remembered you saying to me in Vegas was that when you were writing, you have one of the things. One of the things. This was at the very beginning. I don't know if we had started drinking yet or not. It was one of the pre-sober things we did. We were talking about your timeline on your big TV monitor that you have on the side of your computer, and then you use that as Oh, look at this. We get a tour. We get
Yeah.
a tour.
There's a giant 40-inch monitor, 42-inch 8K or 4K monitor.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And so when you're setting up and you're writing, how do you put notes over there? Do you put your outline? How does that help you when you're drafting?
I'm just gonna drag something over for you to look at, actually.
Oh, okay. Look at this. We get a how-to from Matthew Mather.
We're looking over his shoulder.
Yeah. No, yeah, we can see it. Yeah.
All right, there's so this is I'm using mind mapping software. I don't know if you've ever heard of mind mapping software.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about it, but I don't know that I actually went and looked at it because I'm a failure.
All right. It's taking a little while to load up here, but everybody bear with me. There
we go.
So can you see that? You can see.
Yeah.
So this is like I go this. So I actually use mind mapping software, and you can map out like chapter by chapter and even point by point. I'll zoom in on some of that, so you can see.
And it's called Mind Mapper? Is that the software?
It's a mind mapping. Well, mind mapping is just a class of software. So it's any mind mapping software would pretty much do. But it allows you to just create bubbles and create like ideas and then link them all together and then to dynamically kind of create instead of trying to write down on paper, it allows you to just go and create bubbles and then link them together or pull them apart and you know. Yeah.
What's the software that you use? What's it called?
This one's called MindMeister.
MindMeister.
Yeah. So it's just a really very fast and easy way to sort of prototype ideas and in an organic kind of way. So
yeah. No, that's very cool.
Yeah. So there you go.
I'm very visual. I like that a lot. We do have a question. Josh, do you want to get Kayleen's question?
Which?
Well, I'll get it.
Yeah, go ahead.
She says, as a thriller writer, do you go back to the beginning and lay in the clues, or do you plot enough ahead of time that you don't have to go back?
Do I go and plot? Oh, well, I mean, anything that happens in a mystery or a thriller, you have to have mentioned it at least twice before, in very explicit terms. So that's when you're doing the sort of the knife edge dance of. You know, how obvious do I make something? Or I think I view plotting a good thriller or even a good mystery as kind of like a magician's trick. You know, like if somebody's doing up close magic and you're looking at their hands and you're waiting for the thing and they're doing the thing and they still do something impossible, even though you're watching their hands the whole time. So plotting a good book is a lot like is doing up close magic. Like you're showing all the cards, you're letting people look as close as they can to what you're doing, and you're still going to surprise them at the end and pull a card from somewhere where they don't see it, but they saw the whole thing anyway. So that's sort of how I view plotting. The thing is, every time somebody pulls off a magic trick, you got to come up with another magic trick. So you can't keep reusing the same magic trick over and over again, which is where why it takes time to plot things properly. Yeah.
I like that.
Coming up with magic tricks.
No, I can definitely see that. One of the books that I'm finishing probably tomorrow is a book that I've been working on for 6 years, and it's one of those complicated plot kind of. It's not really a conspiracy, but the way that it's built structurally, it was confusing for me to write, and so I had to make sure that everything lined up and it's oddly enough, some of the solutions to the problems that I was having presented themselves in like the last couple of days of getting to the end of the book, and I'm like, oh, I could do that, and that would fix this plot hole. But now I've got to change this whole scene like 30 chapters back. So I make a note and then just keep going. Does that happen with you when you're writing your books, when you're actually drafting, or do you fix most of that when you're plotting it?
No, I mean you always have you know, there inevitably end up being structural problems, which sometimes you don't think of, and that's what you use your content editors for and your early beta readers. or with using yourself as the first beta reader. So yeah, I mean, when I plot things out, sometimes you get to a certain point and then you think, oh, damn.
Oh no. Oh, back to the drawing board.
Yeah, and that's your job as a writer. I mean, and that's why it's to use another saying is measure twice and cut once. It's the more time you can spend in plotting and thinking about it very clearly. Like, I view actually writing as in between the lines. Like, by the time the plotting is like actually drawing like the line drawing of a picture, and then when it comes to writing, it's just coloring between the lines. So I'm just adding color in between, but the plot is already, the plot could be, when I'm plotting it out, it could be 5,000-10,000 words, and then when you write it, it's going to be 80,000, 90,000.
That's an awesome analogy. We had also Lauren complimented your analogy about the magic trick too, as well. So those are good. I like that, the one you just said, a lot. That's,
yeah,
I dig it.
What was the thing that you always say, Scott, about twists at the end? You don't want the Deus Ex Machina, but you want it.
It has to be
it's surprising but inevitable,
right? Yeah,
and satisfying.
And satisfying. So if you go look, you're surprised, but if you look back, you're like, well, of course,
Yeah, it's like the sixth sense moment, right?
Right. Oh yeah, yeah.
It's been overused, but it's still good. The first time you watch that, you're like, I didn't know that he was dead the whole time. How could I not see that?
The first time is great. Yeah.
That movie was like the greatest M. Night Shyamalan movie that was ever produced, but it was also the worst because he did that and then he was continually trying to top it after that, and they were just ridiculous after that.
That was his Rosebud, right?
Yeah. Well, and then you have like The Village and Signs, and I mean, you see a twist coming and you're like, okay, there's a twist gonna happen here.
I feel his pain, though. I feel his pain.
Oh, you want to make faces on this side of the camera? My wife's in here like going crazy at me right now.
Yeah, he's not distracting me at all.
It's not distracting at all.
We'll just leave the rest of that to our imagination.
Well, she just got back from a dinner with a whole bunch of doctors, so so what do you have next up, Matt, after Polar Vortex? What do you have on your schedule?
I've got a book called The Dreaming Tree, which is kind of a it's a slightly future police procedural detective type of thing, but it is a little bit horror also. It's about a guy that wakes up and he's one of the first patients that undergoes a full body transplant. So he's in a car crash and he wakes up and he's attached to somebody else's body, and then he slowly discovers that that the person whose body he's attached to actually isn't just like a normal organ donor, that something else happened. So he has to solve the mystery of the person whose body he's attached to. And then at the same time, he's slowly losing his mind. So he becomes a bit of an unreliable narrator, and you're not really sure what is.
I love that.
Yeah. So that's and then so there's a detective in there that's it's called Delta Devlin. So I'm using a little bit of a devil. It's a little bit of a dark series, a little bit darker than some other stuff, and that's the start of her series. So it's the Delta Devlin detective series. So yeah, that's starting off.
Is that the one that's going to be published every 9 months through your publisher, or is that something else?
Yeah, that's through a traditional publisher, and so that's going to be fun. It's going to be a different type of journey for those books as well.
And when do you think the first one's going to be out for that?
It's going to be out on July 6th. So I actually finished writing that book almost a year and a half ago.
Oh, wow.
So, well, more than a year ago, actually. So it's kind of hard you sit on that for so long. It's like a year and a half from when you finish writing it till when it's actually going to come out. But that's a difference in the traditional world. In the self-published world, I write a book and 2 months later, you're like, or a month later, you're like, bang, it's up on Amazon.
Right.
In the traditional world, it's like you got at least a year from when you finish the book till when it comes out, and usually more than that. Yeah.
Unless you're Richard Fox, and then you finish a book, and then the next day you publish it.
you can do that.
I'm making some final edits here. Publish.
Yeah. Hold on, I gotta edit this thing, and then we publish it.
Yeah. Well, you can.
We'll be on a tight deadline.
Yeah, in the self-publishing world, you can go back and you can edit the book as an item. Like you put the book up, and then the next day you can get 50 people that send in typos, and then you can fix all the typos, and you can do it live like that. I mean, you'll tend to get some negative reviews at the beginning, but you can, I've done that. I've gone back and edited books. I've even changed some of my characters a little bit after I start off a series.
Nice.
Yeah.
But a lot of those early reviewers are probably people who are already fans, so they're probably not going to beat you up too. If you're like really established, like Richard is.
Yeah.
I would like to think. I would like to think, though. I'm in my optimism phase today. So everything is unicorns and rainbows
around here.
Yeah, unicorns and rainbows on Keystroke Medium right here.
Well, we are going to do a giveaway this show because I said we were going to. And
I think
so
that's reckless and irresponsible.
I mean, it really is. It really is. So I am going to pull up the mediums spreadsheet. So let's see here. Let's take this out here. If you're not a mediums,
how do you get on the medium spreadsheet to be part of these giveaways, Josh?
I'm going to tell you right now. You definitely need to be on the mediums. Why can I not delete this row? People, work with me here, Google. I don't know why Google's doing this to me
Skynet.
right now. I don't know what you did, Scott, to the internet, but you did something to the internet, and it didn't like you today.
It's very angry at me today. Yes, that's true.
Okay, so let me bring up the Medium spreadsheet right now. If you're not on the Mediums list, it is our non-newsletter list that we use to keep track of people that are eligible for giveaways that we do on the show occasionally. And right now, there are a couple people that are eligible, and let me block out this. And so here's what I'm going to do. We're going to give away. This is going to be a twofer. So this is a really good giveaway if you're on the mediums list right now. This is a twofer. Okay, we're going to give away one of the one-of-a-kind proof copies for a Kingdoms of Iron and Stone, and a sticker. Check that out.
The stickers are awesome.
So if you're on the mediums list, so if you're not on the mediums list, then you need to go to keystroke.medium.com/mediums and just sign up. It's not a newsletter. You're not ever going to get any emails from us unless you win and you're not on a live show. If you win and you're not on a live show, then I'll send you an email. But today we're going to do a giveaway. We're going to give this away. We're not doing. There's 3 of these that exist in all of humanity.
Only 3, just 3.
Yeah, just 3.
And there shall be 3.
The number of the counting shall be 3. Neither shall thou count 2. So
let's now proceed directly to 3.
To 3. So we're going to do that giveaway and a sticker. You can actually buy the stickers if you want on our website too. So let's see here. Let's set this up right proper so people know what I'm doing. Y'all, bear with me. I should have set this up while Matt was talking, and like a miserable host of the show, I did not. Random number generator. Here we go. Random number generator. Thank you, Google.
The suspense is literally killing me. I'm dying.
I mean, it's literally killing me.
I may fall right off
literally
the side.
Okay. All right, here we go. Let me move this so we don't get the crazy thing. Screen share, and then we're gonna do screen 1 and share. Okay, so you guys should be seeing my screen right now. And so we have
looking at your search history.
Yeah, don't look at my search history. That's not good. Okay, so I don't know what this 9 is. It came up automatically when I here. Look, I'll restart it. Look, watch. It does this crazy thing. So we have 24 people that are on the list. I'm gonna put 24 in there. That's the max, 1 to 24, and then we're gonna generate a number. Who's gonna win? I don't know.
It's like science.
Oh, let's see. 23. 23 is Cammie Dutton. Cammie Dutton, I'm gonna send you an email because congratulations, you just won a sticker and our one-of-a-kind proof copy for the Kingdoms Kingdoms of Iron and Stone anthology, which will be released this week. This week, just so you know, if you didn't.
Some fantastic stories in there. And
that's right. That's right. It's a great anthology. It'll be released this week, and I'll have more details coming in the next couple of days. But congratulations, Cammie. And I'll send you an email. We can get your address and we'll send you the book and the sticker. But Matt, thank you so much, man, for coming on the show. It was great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'll be seeing you again live in Las Vegas again next November.
Yeah. We'll do that.
It's gonna be a great time.
We may have to try to do another interview. I'm really intrigued about your cop thriller procedural book you're going to do.
Yes.
Maybe we should come on and talk about that, if an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I'll be going through the whole traditional publishing process as well, which I could. So I mean,
could be interesting. Yeah,
I can talk to you guys about that. Yeah.
But definitely Vegas for sure. I'm sure there'll be no fire involved or other.
Well, we could have some extinguishers on standby.
What fire?
Well, yeah. I think there should be.
What are you talking about, Scott?
I'm sorry. I just.
Everybody that come out and hung out with us in the live chat, thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out with us. Really, really, really appreciate it. Always appreciate you guys' support. If you aren't on the mediums list, go and sign up. Our first anthology will be out this week. Stand by for details. It's been a really, really good time talking to Matthew tonight. Next week we have, let's see, what's coming up on Thursday. Lauren and Kayleen have, Ellen Campbell's going to be on the show Thursday.
That's going to be the most dangerous show ever.
This is a really risky show. People submitted some of their writing work, and Ellen took her red pen to it. And so we're going to be able to see actual editing notes for actual drafts of things that writers have submitted. And then next week on live, we have Nicholas Sansbury Smith on the show. He's a great guy. I love his Helldiver series. Fantastic. And then we're going to have a roundtable, and then Haley Stone for Make Me No Grave, which is a phenomenal book if you haven't read it. And then Josh Giselle is going to be on to round out the month. So great month here on live. So everybody, thank you so much for supporting the show and hanging out with us on your Monday night. We will be back next week. We're going to talk about some reading. We're going to talk about some writing, and of course, everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. Peace.